Good morning, everybody, and welcome to State of the Dark Web in 2025. My name is Eric Clay. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Flare, and I co-lead our research team here with Mathieu Lavoie. So we're excited to be with you today, Matt. And Mathieu, do you want to introduce yourself, and we'll go around the room quickly?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Eric. So I'm Mathieu, one of the co-founders of Flare. I'm also a CTO, and like Eric mentioned, we are leading the research team together. So I'm here with a lot of my fellow colleagues that are probably more knowledgeable than I am from the research team. So I'll let, without further ado, I'll let Tammy present herself.
Hi, everyone. Tammy Harper here, Senior Threat Intelligence Researcher at Flare, and very happy to be here.
Tammy, you had to pass it on, but I'll pass it to Chris on your behalf, Tammy.
Yeah, Chris, yeah, exactly.
All right, thank you. My name's Chris Dion. I am a threat intel researcher here at Flare. Thanks everybody for coming. And I will pass the torch to Oleg.
Hey, so my name is Oleg. I'm a CTI analyst at Flare, mainly focused on Russian-speaking cybercrime, and nice to meet you all.
So I'm going to say everybody on this call has been far too humble. Tammy is a world-class expert in ransomware. Oleg is an expert in Russian language cybercrime ecosystem. And Chris is a software developer and expert in many different things, including DPRK IT workers and the Infostealer ecosystem. So I feel they've done and Mathieu obviously is our co-founder, so he's an expert in everything. So they've done a very poor job selling themselves, but I'm glad to have everybody on today, and it's my job to help them market themselves. If we could go to the next slide, please. So the first thing I want to point out, and I think this is kind of funny. So this is the third incarnation or fourth incarnation of this webinar. We did the first one in 2022, which was just Mathieu and I. And one of the cool things is Flare has grown and we've built out our team is we have like many more folks to do it with now. So instead of just hearing that Mathieu and I talk at you, where you're actually going to get to hear from kind of different subject matter experts focused on like very different subspecialties in the cybercrime ecosystem. I would encourage you as we go to ask questions and be really engaged. Like we would love to answer your questions and have this be almost more of a discussion than us just presenting to you. But with that being said, we're really excited to jump straight in. If you'd go to the next slide for me, Chris. So we're starting with the Russian language cybercrime ecosystem. And Oleg, I'm going to ask you a very easy question based on this slide, which is what are the major trends in the Russian language cybercrime ecosystem?
Well, this is a perfect question. I think we can go to the next slide and I will be able to answer it. But before, a very small introduction. When we talk about Russian-speaking cybercrime, we need to understand that it's not equal to Russia. So please don't make this mistake. Don't talk to me about Russian forums or Russian hackers or these kind of things. Because if someone is speaking Russian, it doesn't mean that he's necessarily from this country. So this very short reminder, and we can go to the next slide. Yeah. So overall, the goal of this presentation is to present you what are the very broad and high-level trends. Well, from my perspective, some of the most interesting things that occurred this year is that the cooperation between the Western law enforcement and Ukraine is continuing to rising and to becoming more and more important. And this resulted basically in several arrests and several important police operations. What is also very interesting is that on the other side of this coin, the conflict between Russia and the Western world is also getting hotter and hotter, and Russia is continuing to basically instrumentalize its cybercriminal ecosystem against the West, and they are less and less cooperating when it comes to arrests. So we are going to have an occasion to talk about that. So I think it's very interesting. Also, if we dive in some more interesting cases that we are going to explore very swiftly today, I think you all heard about the police operation that targeted Luma C2 Infostealer. Well, it's basically something that started the decline of this Infostealer, but it's not what killed it. But we are going to see it's basically more internal strife. And what is also very interesting out of it is that it once again highlights the fact that the community the Russian-speaking cyber community is extremely capable of adapting and evolving very rapidly. As we're going to see, Lumacy 2 disappeared, but you already have some other infostealers like Aura, who is basically like a copy-paste of their code, at least initially was. Now it's something else. Same goes with the arrest of XSS admin like in Ukraine this year. Well, XSS didn't disappear, even if the community is now split into different parts. So I think we can go to the next slide and
maybe one thing, Oleg, before you jump, I think it was an interesting link to make to the prediction and to what we discussed late 2024. We were wondering last year, approximately at the same time, what will happen with Telegram with like the arrest of Pavel. Look like what we've seen as trend in 2025 is there way more movement into the actual Telegram channel, but Telegram is still thriving in terms of ecosystem for the different community and illicit community and cybercrime community that we see. But there's more of a turnaround channel and to be up to date and really kind of a moving from one channel to the other. I think this is probably like the trend from Telegram. That would be my takeaway is Telegram is still there, still thriving, but a little bit less stable, more work to do in order to keep on track on the constantly changing channel.
Yeah, this is like a very accurate assessment, and basically is going to be my last slide. And like we are going to see the statistics, and I'm going to explain why all of this happens. Basically, the fact that Pavel Durov, one of the co-founders and CEO of Telegram, was arrested in France, is a big explanation and like a big reason behind this logic. But as we are going to see, things didn't really improve as much as we would like. So just to complement what I've just told, like several very interesting operations from law enforcement occurred in the last year, and they are basically an illustration that like Western police is trying to act against this cybercriminal ecosystem in a very innovative way. Normally, if you are a cybercriminal in France or like in other countries, what will happen is that you will not have a very flashy website that will be created to talk about the operation and that you got arrested. What will happen is that you will receive a visit from the police and you will finish in jail. That's basically it. But because mostly the cybercriminals from Russian-speaking countries are outside of the reach of Western law enforcement, they are forced to conduct a very marketing-heavy operation and campaigns to destroy the trust of customers of those malware as a service and other malicious service, and to basically frighten those people and to make them understand, even if we cannot reach you and we cannot put you in jail, we can learn who you are, we can de-anonymize you, and we can punish you in other ways. So like this, you have some of the examples of operations that occurred, and what is also very interesting is that like although like there is a reputation of total impunity for people living in Russia or in Belarus or other Russian-speaking countries, this reality is less and less true, and there is a different level of consequences for them. I think we can go on to the next slide.
If I could ask a question, Oleg. I read an article a couple of days ago about Russia's kind of hybrid warfare campaign, specifically in the European Union, where there have been bombings of rail lines. There was apparently a potential plot to blow up airliners heading to the United States. Can you talk a little bit about how would you say that the Russian state is kind of using cybercrime as another part of their hybrid warfare? Would you say they're tolerating it, encouraging it? But sometimes they also make arrests. So can you help clear or can you provide some clarity on how the Russian state is intertwined with the cybercrime ecosystem?
Yeah, well, this is just a perfect transition for this content. Like what we have observed and what I have spoke about in one of our last Flare Academy about Russian-speaking forums, is that the Russian state and sometimes also the Ukrainian state and the Belarusian state, at least in the past, they instrumentalized those cybercriminal communities and cybercriminal leaders, mostly for financial gain, but also for political motivations. So, for example, one of the very famous cases is that the hackers team that was reportedly responsible for the attack on Hillary Clinton email was hired by two FSB agents that were the administrator of a cybercrime forum that was called Motherfucker. So this is just like one single small example of how law enforcement, intelligence services are instrumentalizing cybercrime to conduct their dirty attacks without, basically to put without claiming them themselves. I would like to highlight a very interesting article that was written by Anastasia Sentsova. She's working at Analyst One, which is called Russian Cybercrime State Militarization. And this is basically the next step. We have seen this instrumentalization for political and financial motives, and now we are in a step of militarization. So we are using, the Russian state is using people in the Russian-speaking world, so in Ukraine, even in Germany, they're going to hire these Russian speakers who sometimes feel more attached to Russia rather than to the country where they live. And they are going to use them for different purposes. It can be a physical operation, conduct some drone attack or conduct some reconnaissance, or it can be a cyber criminal activity or a cyber attack. Like, for example, it's the case for the famous activist group Cyber Army of Russia, or no name O57. Like one of the last cases of such instrumentalization was the indictment of a Ukrainian national, Victoria Dubranova, that occurred like 2 days ago. And although she's a Ukrainian national, her allegiance, her personal allegiance is closer to Russia, and she was indicted for her involvement in Cyber Army of Russia and the name, and for conducting attacks on critical infrastructure, mainly in the water sector in the US. So I think it concludes this part, and we can go to the next slide. Yes, the next slide. I don't want to eat everyone's time. So yeah, this is like just a very quick other example. I'm going to jump it quite quickly after that. I think you all heard about one of the major events of this year, which was the arrest of Toha, who was the administrator for several years of one of the most famous Russian-speaking cybercrime forum, which is XSS. And previously he was the creator of another one, which is Exploit. So now he is in prison, and it was a very successful operation that was conducted by French law enforcement, by Europol, and by Ukrainian police. But unfortunately, the forum did disappear, and today you have a new administrator of XSS. Although the community is not trusting him, and the community is split, and now we have two forums. We have XSS and DamageDid. So if you want to learn more about that, we can go next slide.
Can I interrupt here for a minute, Oleg? I want to open it up to a bit of a panel discussion, because we've seen obviously a lot of cybercrime forums and markets get taken down at various points. So breach forums is a good example of this, where I think we've seen probably 4 iterations of breach forums where one gets taken down, another one comes up. XSS is obviously kind of significant in a lot of ways, right? Because you have, it's one of the long-standing Russian cybercrime forums. So I'm going to put Tammy and Mathieu on the spot here. And I'm curious, like, how do you guys see the takedown of XSS in the kind of context of the broader cybercrime ecosystem, and how does it parallel with other takedowns that we've seen in terms of the effects on the community?
Well, one of the biggest things is, and this is something that I think law enforcement is like really going after, is the escrow, right? Because XSS had 10 million in crypto in escrow, or something like that. So if you take away the trust that you can conduct business, you're gonna make it really hard for people to sell and buy things. So like being able to escrow was such a big part of XSS. It was such a big part. And now people don't trust it, right? There's people, like half the people are saying it's vetted, and then the other half are saying like it's back to normal, the moderators control it now. So it's like you seriously hurt trust. And trust is everything in criminality and in the underground. When like the old saying is so true, like, is there honor among thieves, right? And it's so fascinating for me to understand that trust model and how people like conduct their business online like that.
So that's a really interesting point about the escrow specifically, and how disrupting XSS disrupts the cybercrime economy in some very significant ways because you lose the escrow service. Mathieu, I was going to ask you a follow-up question on how you think the takedown of XSS compares to some of the other takedowns of major cybercrime markets and forums that we've seen in recent years.
Yeah, I'll bring you back to like a long time ago when like the illicit market were thriving, and like it was actually like, and they did a lot of takedown. Remember like the Dreams forums with the Alphabet, the Club RS, and all of those takedown did have a dent on a shift forward from like illicit market to actually other way to from, especially like we see some shift to XSS at that time of some of the listing. I think it does have an impact. I think it does create a different, I think as Tammy explained, it creates some kind of a confusion within that ecosystem, and actually that's probably to lack of a better solution is the best temporary solution you can have to actually slow down the ecosystem. I think there is some parallel to be made as well, especially as well if you want to compare like Infostealer with ransomware. We see a lot of like law enforcement actually impacting ransomware, and like when they take down Black Hat, LV, and all of those groups back in the day. What we see is, I think we see some shift towards the law enforcement actually being more interested about the Infostealer. We've seen the takedown, as you mentioned, Operation Endgame. We've seen as well some Luma C2 being kind of a taken out, and even Operation Magnus for the red line as well. So we started to see, I think it took a couple of years for the Infostealer to kind of took like to be more and more as a threat that everyone was talking about. It took some time for the law enforcement to react to it, but I think what we're seeing right now is it is an important problem that we're tackling, because it does change the threat landscape when they do attack those actual malware infrastructure.
Thank you very much, Mathieu. I think those are all excellent points. Oleg, I'm going to hand it back over to you on the XSS admin arrest.
Yeah, we're not going to deep dive into that. I just put a link. If you're interested, you can have a look at it. It's a public version of this graph. So if you want to have a look, just please investigate it. But we are going to pass to the next slide. So another like important event, it's I think a very good transition. We were talking about Luma, and it's a very interesting case because as Tammy noted, like trust is everything in this ecosystem. So Luma was up until like middle of this year probably one of the most successful Infostealer malware as a service that was currently available. And what is interesting is that there was a police operation that targeted the C2 and infrastructure of this Infostealer. And we at Flare, we are observing like quite closely what's going on with the amount of stealer logs that are coming from different sources. And we have seen just a very minor drop from Luma. They basically were able to very swiftly reconstruct their entire infrastructure. And after a week, it was mostly business as usual. What eventually finished them was very, very funnily like an internal strife, an internal conflict. that resulted in, I'm going to show you on the next slide, it resulted in doxing of several internal members. So it's because of that today this brand is mostly dead, and it stopped being supported, and now users are reorienting themselves to other solution. We can go next slide. So here is just an example of the website. If you are in the Discord, we can share you the link to this website that is still online. We remind that doxing is not something good, and that we always need to be very careful with this type of content, because we never know if it's a disinformation campaign, a very clever exit scam, maybe conducted by Luma themselves. So we always need to be careful and not believe what is just written on the internet, and always verify it. Next slide. So this is basically my conclusion for this part, which is although you may have some law enforcement actions, some internal disruptions. Tammy is going to talk about ransomware, but it's mostly the same. Because there is still money to make in this cybercriminal activity, and because there are some people who still believe that they are not going to be punished in one way or another, there is this perceived impunity. Well, obviously nature doesn't like void, and now we have a lot of new malware as a service that appeared and that are trying to fill the gap. Some of them are new, like Aura. Some of them are older, like Vidar, but their popularity is obviously rising because Infostealer malware in the log extraction and the theft of cryptocurrency is still a very important and profitable business for cybercriminals. Next slide. Well, this is just a very short one. Some of my favorite forums. Next slide. So we were talking about Telegram, and this is a very interesting case. As I mentioned previously, last year we had the arrest of Pavel Durov, and in France. Since then, we have seen a rise of bans in various Telegram channels, and of course, it has a negative effect, and it has a disruptive effect on cybercrime. But for the moment, we need to also admit that cybercriminals still continue to use Telegram, because there is no any viable alternative that appeared yet. We have seen different things, such as, for example, Simplex and other applications that want to steal the market of Telegram, if I may say it like that. But currently, even though you have a lot of bans, cybercriminals are simply adapting by creating private channels where they're going to accept only trusted people, and they will have a ton of public channels that can get banned, and it's not that important for them. Next slide, and it's going to be our conclusion. So this is data from last year, but I've checked it today. It didn't really change. This is the amount of links for different messaging services that are mainly posted inside the cybercriminal underground. So although the data is a little bit old, we are going to re-update in January, I think, our blog. The idea remains the same, and the data that I could check, the numbers are mostly the same. Telegram continue to dominate the cybercriminal underground. So that's it for me, and I think I can pass to Tammy.
Yes, thank you, Oleg. So Tammy, well, I don't think we have a lot of slides for ransomware, but Tammy, I want to start, if you could get back to the last slide for me, Chris. I want to start by asking you, so obviously Telegram has been a huge part of the cybercrime ecosystem. I would love to start by just asking you about some of the major changes you've seen in the ransomware ecosystem in the past 6 months or so, and obviously for all of 2025 as well. And then also ask you kind of about how ransomware groups are navigating, because I know XSS was a major forum used by ransomware groups. So sorry, before I ask a 6-part question, I'll stop there and let you answer the first 2 parts.
Yeah, XSS actually they discouraged ransomware discussions on it very actively. But it was very much, so this year you had, so it's interesting. So you had a lot of the big guys are moving away, rebranding. We had like a lot of leaks. We had like Black Basta leak their internal chat, and that was fascinating as a researcher to go through and understand just how much of a business they operated, as a corporate business they operated. But now we're seeing a lot of, like, if you look at what we saw, like the old guard, like I keep saying the old guard, like the ex-Conti guys and like the Lockbits and things like that, like they're around, right? But like they've made money and now they're like not the front and center. They're not the ones that have like the most drive right now. And they're not like really active. So you have a lot of these like fly-by-night groups coming up, and so these are smaller groups that pop up, and we've seen a lot of those this year. And basically, they pop up, they repackage data, like similar to like Coinbase Cartel, where they pop up, data extortion, and they repackage data, and then they like try to make a money off of that. Everest was interesting as well. Like basically a vigilante went up against Everest and was able to take down their site by defacing it, and now they're back. But that definitely disrupted them, and they came back with a little bit of a vengeance. I'm referring to XOXO Prague from Prague. There's a lot of like the older group, like the smaller groups are maturing. So like Nova is maturing, but again, they're I think it's also just the time of year where a lot of the groups now are, and it's also getting so much easier to create these new groups. Like the everybody knows the game plan, everybody knows the business plan, and there's so much like actual free open source like source code out there to just like rip off to build your base on. So like, and then you have like the massive campaigns. So a lot of the groups now are like Akira is like this whole year, pretty much for the past 6 months, they've been targeting like Sonic Wall firewalls, and they've been very, very successful at that. And they're basically like that's their thing now. They're doing that. Clop was very successful, at least in terms of exfiltrating data for the Oracle EBS suite stuff. I'm checking some of the data there from Clop, and it's like I'm not going to be surprised if it's going to surpass like 100 terabytes of data that they were able to exfiltrate in that campaign and host it on BitTorrent, right? And so it's and then you have like, of course, like the old guard, like the Dragon Force, the Killins. Like what's fascinating about like these older ones is that they're not big game hunting anymore. And shout out to Valerie for this amazing article. He basically like the groups are not big game hunting anymore. They're targeting like small, medium-sized businesses, and there's like, as companies, like we're doing something right because a lot of the companies have matured as like security now, and we're doing things right. We're defending properly, and it's getting, at least for like the big corporations, it's getting harder and harder, right? So that's why you have a lot of the like shiny hunters lasses. They're basically going towards like insider trading now, and focusing on not insider trading, but like getting insiders, right? And they're trying to get that connection from the inside like that. And
I'm gonna interrupt you there for a moment, Tammy, if I could. We have a bunch of questions that have built up, and I want to do kind of a roundtable for questions because there's a ton. I think you covered a ton of ransomware activity there, but I also did promise the audience interactivity So I want to make sure we are able to jump into some questions, and then we'll jump further into some slides. I'm going to ask Chris to start. Chris, are there any good resources for scraping in general as well as dark web scraping?
Well, aside from the Flare platform, of course, I would say that what you really want to do with dark web scraping is probably, I would say the best bang for your buck is write your own scripts. There are a lot of free libraries that you can use that make scraping really, really easy with really just a few lines of code. And you can set up your own Tor proxy very easily on your machine. I would say go for it yourself. You've got LLMs, you can do it. I believe in you.
Yeah, I think one piece of advice as well on the question as well is like scraping the HTML is one thing. Then after, I think if you want to make sense out of it, you have no choice in structuring the information and deduplicating it. So I think it's also kind of keep that in mind while you are doing like the crawling of the website, to make sure you have the appropriate toolings and library to extract the relevant pieces of the page and make sense and structure it in a more structured database than just like a pure full text index of all the HTML pages, because it can get messy, it can get noisy quickly.
Right.
And one thing to add to that is I would, one big thing that people come up against is a technical decision when you're storing a lot of data, how to store it. I think a lot of software developers will sort of their first tool that they go to is something like MongoDB, where you can just sort of dump JSON into a database without really thinking about it. I would say resist that impulse and use Elasticsearch. You can index things and do search on big amounts of data that you've scraped much easier if you use Elasticsearch to start out with. So that's just my pro tip.
All right, our next question is, can you clarify what percentage of messengers categorized as public invites versus private? I'm curious. If you have any specific statistics on their distribution, how did you come up with those numbers? Do those numbers include inactive Telegram channels? I'm reading in Telegram channels here. Oleg, I'm going to throw this one over to you.
Sorry, once again?
Yep, the question was, could you clarify the percentages of messenger invites categorized as private versus public? I'm curious if you have any specific statistics on their distribution. How did you come up with the numbers, basically?
Yeah, well, so we counted only unique invite links. That was the main idea. And we also counted, people who were sharing their contacts with, which is like basically at contact for Telegram. Usually it's shared like that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah. If we can think of, and it depends as well of different messenger application you're using there. Like, and I think I'll as well answer one of the question that is in there is like, for most of the Discord sessions signals, there was usually more like a specific invite to join a specific channel or invitation. I think what we see for Telegram, which is a little bit different and what makes it special from the other messaging platform we see in there, is there's some way to actually browse what are the different rooms that are available there and actually join some of the rule based on keyword based on tooling that exists in order to find and discover some coverage there. And I think this is what makes Telegram one reason why Telegram is special, and this is why it's still like one of the most important messaging platform being used at the moment in that context, is because you can discover based on your interest some community. I think the second part that makes Telegram special as compared to other like Signals or Session or Matrix is the API. I think the API of Telegram is, as mentioned in the chat, it's really strong, and I think it allow a lot of automation and a lot of possibility. It is possible with Matrix. I think the Matrix issue is, again, echoing a little bit to what Tammy has said, is you need to trust the owner of the Matrix server, and that is sometimes like an issue of like, would you be willing to trust another cyber criminals when you are working in cyber criminals community as the owner and the manager of the channel. So that's I think, in my opinion, one reason why Matrix was. We didn't see that much of Matrix in the data, less than I would have expected.
All right, let's move on to the Infostealer ecosystem. Please keep putting your questions in the chat. We are in the Q&A or the chat, either one works, and we'll answer another set here in probably about 10 to 12 minutes, because we have two sections to get through here, Infostealers and DPRK IT workers. Next slide, please, Chris. So I'm going to start by just giving a brief description. Infostealer malware is a type of malware that infects a computer and steals all of the credentials and session cookies saved on the browser. Along with other things, it will also steal Discord tokens, VPN credentials from the computer, cryptocurrency wallets. You can think of it as kind of like grabbing all of the valuable information off of your computer, everything except for like really heavy files. All of this information, including operating system information, browser fill data, etc., gets stolen and sent to C2 infrastructure. And then threat actors can use that to obviously log directly into services, but also replay sessions using anti-detect browsers to gain direct access to active sessions for a variety of applications. You can imagine for a single stealer log, you can end up with dozens and dozens of different enterprise credentials that get passed around or sold in the cybercrime ecosystem on Telegram. And this has become one of the major threat vectors for companies today. So the Snowflake breaches were a great example of this, where you had threat actors using Infostealer logs, ULPs, and credentials to go directly after Snowflake customer environments rather than Snowflake itself. And we continue to see a predominance of Infostealers in the cybercrime ecosystem, simply because it's much, much easier to exploit credentials found on a Telegram channel than it is to develop a custom exploit for some kind of 0 day or 1 day. Please go to the next slide for me, Chris. This is what a stealer log looks like, but I built a little tool that you can see on our website if you're curious on what to interact with a stealer log. So you can go on here and actually go through it. It's I think it's pretty interesting, but I built it. But you can go into the passwords.txt file. Obviously, this is all fake data. But this is what a stealer log looks like to a cybercriminal. You get an entire, all of the information besides big files from an entire machine. And so it's just a really, really high risk vector. And we see criminals talking about using stealer logs to gain access to enterprise systems, but also to consumer accounts almost constantly in the ecosystem. Mathieu, how would you say Infostealers have changed in the past few years, if at all?
I think the core capacity stayed the same. They have a little bit of cat and mouse game with the isolation process for Chrome, and the bypass has been made. I think one thing that is important to mention is they follow up the trend, but the fact that now in Chrome you have some kind of process isolation require the Infostealer to do things that are a bit more visible from an EDR perspective, like interacting with a COM process, injecting into other process memory, or doing other things than just reading the file flat. So I think there was some improvement that was made in terms of defense that made the Infostealer more detectable. I think we see a lot of king of the hill metaphor here, where we have one player that was there, it was redline when we started looking into it. This one fall, and then we have a lot of Luma C2. There was some kind of running guy, Luma C2 was everywhere you're looking on the internet, there was some kind of Luma C2. And with the takedown, it's funny because it's interesting more than funny. It's interesting because it did take some time for us to see a dent in the data we're collecting. At first, when we started takedown of Luma C2, and we weren't the only one, it was other cybersecurity vendor that talk about it, that didn't make a difference in terms of takedown. But now, as Oleg mentioned, we really see a decline in that Luma C2, and you see other kind of a potential market leader in that space to kind of took off. I think there's a lot more differentiation about being stealth, being fully undetectable. There's a lot of discussion and value proposition of the info malware stealer around like efficiency and speed and being like well code. We see a lot of like in C++, we see one in like in Rust, and we see like some kind of a more professionalization, I'd say, of those malware more recently, and we see that those malware started to target more the browser, but we see more and more files and software being targeted. So we think about password manager, we think about anything related to cryptocurrency. So any like application related to cryptocurrency that you can have on your machine. We can think about VPN, we can think about like mail clients. So we see more and more of a broader set of applications being targeted by info malware stealer, more than just the browser with the autofill and the history and the cookie and the credential. So it started to be more as a more functionality, and that's really what we see looking at the different listing out there. They really try to differentiate on the feature and the efficiency and the how good, quote unquote, the malware is.
Thank you, Mathieu. I'm gonna answer a question here, and then I'm gonna pass it to Chris to see if he has anything he wants to add. So, does most Infostealer data come from sources being compiled together? Since we no longer have the likes of Genesis, this landscape seems to have shifted to a decentralized model as opposed to a few centralized platforms dominating the market. And I'm going to take a first stab at this answer, and then I'm going to hand it over to Chris. So historically, I think there's kind of two questions embedded in here. I think the first one could be summarized as, how are threat actors using Infostealers? Are they going through individual Infostealer logs, or are they relying more on like ULPs and combo lists where they're taking individual lines from Infostealer logs, combining them together, and attempting to log in? I think that answer is really difficult. Like, you see, obviously, threat actors leveraging directly Infostealer logs to gain access to a single user, but you also do see kind of a systematization of Infostealers to kind of like try to mass hack accounts, basically using checkers. And obviously, ULPs are also very, very common in the cybercrime ecosystem. The second question relates to platforms. So we had Genesis Market, which is taken down. Russian Market is still up. So Russian Market is still a primary avenue for threat actors to gain Infostealer logs. But historically, we've seen the vast majority of the ecosystem has always been on Telegram. So if you look at the collection we do from Genesis Market versus Russian Market versus Telegram, more than 90% of logs, I would say, and Chris or Mathieu, correct me if you think that's an inaccurate number, or end up on either begin on Telegram or end up on Telegram versus being on one of the auto shops. Chris, I would love your thoughts on this as well, though.
Yeah, I do agree. I think that the most immediately accessible source of Infostealers, of Stealer logs rather, is Telegram. I have seen a ton of aggregator channels that will repackage in zip files, a pack, a sort of a sample pack from bigger dedicated channels. Like, you'll get a zip file of, a couple of hundred Stealer logs from Fate traffic with a couple of days delay, so other threat actors have gotten their hands on it a couple of days before you, but it might be useful for your purposes. There are certainly a lot of channels that now combine ULPs and combo lists and Stealer logs. Just sort of a big grab bag. I think most people probably use that for password spraying. You just take a whole bunch of passwords and spray and pray, see if you can get a login somewhere. But no, I mean, I certainly see a lot of dedicated channels where, like Fate traffic, like there are channels that have their own source of Stealer logs. Flare has had some success tapping into sort of more upstream channels where the Stealer logs are being generated and uploaded to Telegram automatically from bots. So yeah, I mean, it's alive and well on Telegram. Yeah, so I agree with you, Eric.
Awesome. Well, we're going to go on to our last segment here, and then because we have a ton of questions we still want to get to, but I do want to go through our DPRK IT worker segment with Chris first. So Chris, I'm just going to hand it directly over to you because I think it's a very interesting content. I don't think it needs a lot of questions.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, this year in 2025, we have seen a real uptick in reporting on North Korean threat actors. They've sort of been an underdog historically, but the spotlight has really been on them, and they have been very heavily scrutinized this year for their activities. Today, I'm going to talk about IT workers specifically, but there are tons of things that North Koreans do. They have huge infrastructure in North Korea for various offensive cyber operations. You know, you've seen evidence of North Korea being involved with supply chain attacks, like, you know, NPM style supply chain attacks, upstream attacks on open source software. Obviously, crypto theft. They've been doing that for years. All kinds of stuff. So today we're going to talk about the IT workers. They've gotten a ton of coverage this year. So they go under a lot of different names: famous Chalima, Jasper Sleet, UNC 5267, Nickel Tapestry, Wage Mole. A lot of these names are not necessarily referring to the exact same group. I think what is most important to note about these IT workers is that they are everywhere in the DPRK party state. They are so successful that they've been deployed anywhere that it is convenient to have IT workers generate extra revenue for a department or a ministry or a front company in North Korea. So these guys are tech workers. They've been trained. You know, they've gone to university for computer science, usually in Pyongyang. And they work for either a government agency or a front company subordinate to a government agency, and they work IT jobs. They work remotely. They will pose as, you know, maybe Singaporeans, or, you know, they'll say, I'm from Hong Kong, I'm from Singapore, I'm from Japan, et cetera, et cetera. They will get jobs using fake identities and funnel the majority of that money back to the state. Generally speaking, the objective is revenue generation. We have seen evidence of malicious activity happening on top of that. Like, somebody will get hired and then they'll steal crypto from the company. You know, a lot of IT workers that work for crypto companies will also try and steal money. But frankly, the majority that we have seen are simply trying to do a good job. They want to keep the job because it's a steady stream of revenue. So a lot of it is purely revenue generation. A lot of the time they are sent abroad to places like China and Russia because there's better internet there. You know, there are restrictions in places like China on the internet, but not even anywhere close to what the restrictions are in North Korea. So they'll often be abroad, and they will often look for collaborators. They'll look for Americans or Europeans to lend them their identities to use as a front, and they'll get a cut of the money. They'll maybe get 20 or 30%, and they may not know that the people that they're working with are North Korean. So the big thing is that North Korea is not as rich a country as a place like China or Russia or anywhere else. They need to sort of really fly by the seat of their pants and be resourceful, and so they use a lot of open source software. They often have to pirate software, and so they really set themselves up to get infected by infostealers. So a lot of the research that we've been doing this year at Flare is, hey, what can we find in our Infostealer database that relates to North Korean IT workers? And we found that indeed countless North Korean IT workers have been infected by infostealers, mostly by downloading sketchy VPN software, proxies, crypto wallets from disreputable sources. So we've seen in these Stealer logs, we have found again hundreds of Stealer logs that we are confident belong to North Korean IT workers. They use a lot of different Chrome profiles. They create a lot of fake throwaway identities. They rely heavily on G Suite. They love Google. They'll just create a Gmail account, create a LinkedIn account, create a GitHub account, and they will sign up for services like Upwork and do freelance work. But what's really preferred is full-time work. So often they will target a specific country. They'll say, okay, I'm going to give myself a Polish name. I'm going to look up universities in Poland, that are famous for their computer science programs. I'm going to create a resume that says I went to University of Warsaw or University of Krakow, and I'm going to put a bunch of companies from Poland that I pretend to have worked for in the past, and I'm going to apply to a bunch of Polish companies. They use, I mean, everybody uses AI, so they obviously also use AI. They will, manipulate their profile picture to look different. They will generate fake names. They'll use AI to generate profile pages on GitHub, things like that. They are all over GitHub. You will, there is you'll see here, there's a screenshot of a GitHub profile page, but they're absolutely everywhere on GitHub. They'll say, the script is usually, hey, I'm from Singapore. I need a US collaborator to help me get a better paying job in US. It pays better than Singapore. And then they'll trick somebody into giving them their banking information. And it really is, it's a real, lucrative model for them, full-time employment. So on the right here, we see somebody advertising a collaboration model. We operate like a remote dev founder team, minus the startup chaos. So they want somebody to be the face of the operation, to go into interviews for them, talk with an American accent, give them their home address to have the laptop sent to them, do a background check, drug test. They'll get a cut of the income, and the North Korean actually does the coding. This is very lucrative. So we see here somebody we found in a Google Translate message in a Stealer Logs browser history, talking about how they split funds between the collaborators and the North Koreans. So yeah, I think that is pretty much all we have about IT workers. I do want to emphasize that, the big threat of IT workers is if they have a collaborator, you can get clearance. You can really get past any vetting procedure that's not really rigorous. They can get into any company that has a less than rigorous vetting process if you have a collaborator. So they are constantly updating their tactics. They used to do a lot of Upwork freelance jobs that got cracked down on. Now they're using collaborators. That's starting to get cracked down. There was a big news story about a laptop farm in America that was working for North Koreans. So yeah, they're always evolving, and next year I'm sure we'll see lots of new tactics from these guys.
Thank you, Chris. Amazing presentation. So I think we have time for one or two questions. We have a lot of questions, and I love the level of engagement, and that we'll be doing Dark Web Jeopardy in the Discord after, so please come join us. It'll be a lot of fun. So the first question is, would you say you have seen any particular focus on Polish firms from DPRK threat actors?
No, I have seen a few people who have used Polish identities. I think that generally speaking, they'll just pick a random European country and say that they're from there. I've seen Danish, Norwegian, French, Polish, obviously Canadian and American. But yeah, they'll just pick a country at random and pretend to be from there.
All right, our next question is, how do you ensure that you're getting Infostealers to customers before the creds are stale? I will hand this one over to either, I think, Mathieu first, and then maybe Chris.
Yeah, I've already kind of given a succinct answer in the Q&A, but I'll summarize it. It's really about, like, the challenge here is the volume and making sure you find the gem in the reposting data that is out there. And the way I think work best is through automation. So it's required to have like automated pipeline to actually ingest and make sense of those big archive and repost archives that are being posted there. I think this is this kind of help us kind of figure out which one are the reposts, which one are the new data that we haven't seen before. And so again, like automation and the duplication will enable you to get what are the delta of the actual content being reposted. I think the second part of it is one solution that could be put in place is to integration with IDP. Okta, Entra ID, or their IDP of your choice, is to actually test those credentials in an automated manner to be sure that those credentials are not valid. I would extend the question as well to ULP, because yes, stealer logs is a volume that we see, but there's also a lot of ULP that are being extracted from stealer logs and for other source of data that also need to be tested out. So I'd say this is probably like the biggest volume, is to have some kind of like integration or automation toward identity provider, IDP or Entra ID, in order to test the big volume of credential, in order to find which ones are actually working, as opposed to the ones that are being reposted or even manufactured. So that are being completely made up credential as well. So I think this is probably the two side of the equation. So automation, deduplication, and testing automatically the credential.
I think we have time for one last question, which is, would you say that carding has died down over the years? I feel like you hear much less about carding than you did, say, 10 to 15 years ago. Is this because of a shift in the landscape of where threat actors are gaining credit card fraud profits from ransomware / other activities? So I think the question is, like, do we see, has carding died down because threat actors have moved to other avenues, or is carding still alive and well? And I'm going to open it up to anyone who wants to answer, because I'm not sure who would be the best person here.
So from what I've seen, like carding, it's just the data has changed slightly. Like so it's still very, very popular in certain countries. So like Brazil, carding is a huge thing. But what we're seeing a lot is like banking Trojans, but like compromised Android APKs. So those like are still extremely popular, and they do a lot of damage that way. Yeah, but it's still popular. It's just like it's shifting from like the countries that have like very strict like rules and protections. It's also like a lag of adoptability in terms of like it's also like countries that have the ability to have phones that can do like NFC tap pays. Like I don't carry a credit card on me, right? So to clone my credit card would be impossible because I don't carry it on me. But if you go to countries that are using a lot of physical cards, then yes, it's going to be something that you can get. So it's all about like the type of like landscape that you're in that has to still use a lot of physical cards, and also like the technical capabilities of like stripping and cloning cards. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. Please do feel free to join us on Discord after. We really appreciate your time, and we hope you really enjoyed it. We also are happy to answer questions on Discord. So you can come join our Discord, and we'll be happy to continue the discussion. Thank you everybody so much, and have a fantastic day.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.